My team, kinda power. I love the power. I love the power.
Hi, and welcome to the BigFooty Port Adelaide podcast, a weekly show dedicated to talking all things Port Adelaide. I'm Enviable Tradition. I'm here today with my regular co-host, Macca19. G'day, mate.
G'day, mate. How's things?
Good, buddy. Good. And Fishing Rick. How are you, mate?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
And joining us on the podcast for the first time, we have the Smaller Warrior. Welcome, buddy.
Cheers, guys.
And we're going to throw straight to you, mate. Get straight into it, as we always like to when we start this podcast. We're going to get you to talk to us about how you became a Port man and what your Port story is.
I don't really have a very interesting story, to be honest. My dad's a massive Woodville supporter from back in the day. My brother's a North Melbourne supporter, and I used to support Richmond because I played a bit of footy for Glenelg back when I was a little kid. So I sort of followed Richmond because they were the Tigers as well, I guess. And then I think it was about year 5 or so at primary school when Port came into the AFL, and my teacher back then was a mad Port supporter. And he, I was a bit of a fat kid, and he did this competition where the first person that could recite the Port the Port song would win a free can of Coke. So I learned the song pretty quick smart, and it just sort of went from there, to be honest. I became a Port supporter after that, and yeah, it's to the point where I'm pretty one-eyed, bit of a nut supporter now, so it's good.
Perfect. So you're basically like the reverse Graham Corns. Started off as a Glenelg supporter, and now you've seen the light.
Yeah, and I guess probably up until recently I was still a Glenelg SNFL supporter. Not like a massive supporter, but I was a member. And then, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago when they started to treat Salopek a bit like shit, I told them to off, and I probably can't swear. I told him to get stuffed, and welcome.
The first one on the show. Well done, TSW.
and yeah, it just went from there.
Beautiful, good stuff, mate. So look, we're going to skip the love-hate for this week because we all decided we didn't really have a lot to hate this week, but we thought we might jump straight into talking about Kenny Hinkley. Obviously, just being named Coach of the Year by all the other coaches, which is a pretty prestigious thing. I'm sure that all of you guys will be pretty supportive of that, but what are your thoughts on the year Kenny's had, guys?
I think he's had a fantastic year. The thing I like most about Kenny is his bluntness. You know, he's just straight down the line, no rubbish. You know, it's all, you know, you get what you deserve. You know, this is how it is. If we play like crap, then we play like crap. He's going to say it. You know, if we play well, we play well, and he's going to say that too. So that's what I really like about Kenny. I think, sort of tactically, I think he's got a lot to give. And I think in terms of development, he's going to be fantastic for this football club.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick?
I'm with you there, Macca. And I thought it was interesting this week with some of his comments, not necessarily jumping for the ageing players that might be available, but looking more at the younger players where he again, going back to that development, where he wants to maybe get the younger crew in and try and sort of mould and develop his own culture and his own stamp on the team, instead of maybe, you know, looking at your Heath Shaws and those other older guys that might be available. And I mean, like you said, Macca, there's really not much else different to really say about Ken Hinkley other than well done and, you know, class act, and hopefully he can back it up next year.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. TSW, did you want to jump in on that, mate?
I don't think there was much to hate really this year. I mean, there was some things throughout the year with selection choices that I sort of questioned at the time, but I can't think of anywhere he actually got really anything wrong. I mean, there were players probably like Solder and stuff that I would have liked to see get a little bit of a chance under Hinkley, but yeah, everything he did, you know, bringing in Thomas and Logan and stuff when he did, I probably questioned it, but they proved me wrong really, especially Logan in the second half of the year in the finals and stuff. And he just seems to, everything he touches turns to gold, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty boring segment, actually, isn't it? Because we're all just going to say what a great job he did, because he really didn't put a foot wrong. And as Macca said, I think the fact that he was just so honest. You know, so often coaches seem to be so concerned about saying the right thing or the wrong thing or what's going to sound good for the media or putting the right spin on things. But really, at the end of the day, the best thing that works for both the players and the media is when they just come out and tell you what they really think and just tell it straight down the line. You know, there's no BS, there's no spin. It's like, this is what you got to do, this is what we expect. this is what the Port Adelaide Football Club's all about. And that's probably the best thing that Kenny's done, is he's come in and right from the bat has just understood what the Port Adelaide Football Club's all about, what made us successful for such a long period of time. And he hasn't sugarcoated it. He's just come in and said, this is what we expect, this is how we do it. And the other thing that I really like about Kenny, and you sort of touched on it before, Rick, is that he's taken the long view. He's not actually saying, well, what do we got to do to try and get the best, to do the best right now, although he has been able to do that at the same time. But he's saying, well, we want to build something that's going to be sustainable for the future. You look at a team like Geelong, who've managed to stay up the top for such a long period of time, because they built that list from the ground up with young players. They brought through the right players with the right culture, with the right, mindset and mentality, the right training, all those sort of things. They've brought them through right from the start, and they've created a list that they've been able to maintain over time, and developed a culture that's allowed younger players to come into that group, buy into the same culture, and keep that going. And it really feels like that's what Kenny's created. I mean, obviously, the first-year coach, there's always that sort of first-year coach syndrome. Can they keep it up for the second year? And that's going to be the big test for Kenny. But, geez, so far so good. You really can't fault a thing he's done.
Hey, can I derail this quickly?
Go.
The Small Warrior mentioned Nick Salter. What about that goal he kicked on the weekend? Sorry, I just had to bring that up. That was just amazing.
I didn't see it.
No, I didn't see it either, Rick, so you have to tell us all about it. What did he do, mate?
Oh, guy, you got, everyone has to YouTube it. Do you see it, the Small Warrior?
My dad's been talking about it all week, but yeah, I didn't get to see it either.
Right, stuck in the, southwestern pocket at Footy Park, but ball's coming down from the air, sort of just with the hand, doesn't even grab it, just sort of guides it and flicks it to his boot, like 30 metres out from goal, exactly like, the opposite of Westhoff with the check side. His was a snap, but he just kicks it straight from the pocket, right on the boundary line. Amazing, absolutely amazing. I've probably struggled to think of a better goal that I've ever seen. So
right.
go and check it out.
We're going to have to take your word for it for now, Rick, but we'll make sure we check it out on YouTube later, and maybe we'll link it.
All attributed to Ken Hinckley's coaching, no doubt.
we might have to put the link in the thread so people can check that out. So we'll find that one for you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is obviously, this week we've had the Brownlow and the BNF. Wingard obviously taking home the BNF, Boakey being the top pollster in the Brownlow. So I thought what might be interesting is obviously talk about what you guys thought of their respective years. Obviously, the rest of the top five in terms of the Brownlow, we had Boak, Ebert, Wingard, Corns, Westhoff. I thought you guys might like to talk about who you thought had the best year, particularly between Boak and Wingard. And, so perhaps, Macca, you can jump in there and give us your thoughts on who you thought should be the BNF for this year.
Yeah, sure. I mean, with the votes that I give in my review threads after the game, I had Wingard as the number one player for the year, with Boak second. So I was pretty happy with him, with Wingard winning the best and fairest. I think it was a very good season for Wingard. Just a phenomenal effort, really, considering how he played last year. He was kind of, as I said last week, he was a little bit undersized, and even this year he's a little bit undersized, but he just got the job done. Just week in, week out, so consistent. Didn't really even play a bad game. I think he polled in every game in the best and fairest. Boakey, actually, just on Wingard again, I thought he was probably got a little bit of a raw deal in the Brownlow. He only polled in 3 games. I thought he probably could have polled in probably another 2 or 3 and got up to double figures. Boakey, he was our hope for the Brownlow. 13 votes. Yeah, I mean, it's a fair effort. He probably could have got another sort of 2 or 3. I think we were hoping that he'd get over the 15 mark, but I mean, we were just so even all year. Guys like Ebert and Hartlett and Corns, they all popped up and scored votes, and I mean, you can't really go wrong with how the umpires voted, I don't think.
And at TSW, we might change the order, mate. Let you jump in next. What were your thoughts, mate?
I mean, everyone knows how much I love Kane Corns. So, I mean, I don't think he was the best this year. I mean, Wingard and Boak clearly were number 1 and 2, but I think Corns' year was, I mean, even though he's in the top 5, still underrated, I think. He's just a player that just keeps going on and just doing things that no one really expects him to do. Just tagging out players, and I think everyone's probably said that his best games generally seem to be the ones where he doesn't, rack up 30 disposals. He gets, maybe early to mid-20s, and he just is able to lock out pretty much any player in the game still. And I think he'll probably be our first 300 gamer, and I think that's probably well deserved from a Glenelg boy as well.
And so who would you have had as the BNF TSW between Boak and Wingard by the sound of it?
Yeah, it's tough. I think probably. Oh shit. I mean, Wingard, because he's so young, is just incredible how well he's played. But I think probably in consistency over the year, you'd probably have to give it to Boak.
Yeah. And Rick, what about you, mate? Who would you have between those two?
Tough one. I'm with Macca. I seem to agree with Macca a lot. I think Wingard for me. I mean, Travis was fantastic, and Brett Ebert was a champion all year. And I think you pointed out early in our podcast, his line and gut running that he does is just amazing. When we first started all of this, and but Chad's just come to the plate for such a young boy and delivered the goods. And I think with the Brownlow, it's such an even spread of votes, shows our team performance, and that's what, going back to Ken as well, we're an even spread team now. We're not relying on or trying to rely on one player. We're trying to spread the load, and that's going to be good for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I probably would have gone with TSW, I reckon. I would have had Boakey as the number one. I just thought, with their different roles, I think Boakey was really getting it done in the middle of the ground, right in the guts, probably getting the number one tag in most weeks. I thought that, given his role, I thought he probably had a harder and a bigger challenge. Wingard was able to play a little bit more, resting in sort of the half-forward line, the forward pocket. Probably somewhat of an easier role, although it can be a pretty challenging role at the same time. I think, once he starts moving a bit more into that midfield time, then he'll start really, in my mind anyway, sort of pushing up to that real top level. Once again, I thought Ebert, it was really good to see Ebert be the second polar in the Brownlow. I was really chuffed for him. I thought he's just done a whole lot of work each year. I don't think he's been better than Wingard, but he's done some amazing work all year. I thought Cornsey being in the top 5, I thought was fantastic, and I think it was a bit of a sign of how his role's changed this year, or at least how he's played a little bit differently this year. I think he's been a lot more creative, a lot more productive this year, and I think that really showed, by catching catching the eye of the umpires a little bit more, and perhaps getting a few more votes. He always polls well in the BNF, but not necessarily from memory as well in the Brownlow. And I thought that was a real sign that he's stepped up, and great to see Westhoff in the top 5 in our Brownlow voting as well. I just thought his consistency this year was greatly improved on what it's been previously, and he's really, I think, this year finally showing what we've known for a long time that he's capable of as a player. And so I think those are 5 players who are really going to take us forward next year. And with some of those youngsters coming through, I think it's really exciting to think what we're going to have coming through in the next few years.
I want to give a shout out to Cameron O'Shea, who got an 8th spot in the best and fairest. Very, very well deserved. He was super consistent all year. And just a remarkable turnaround from, pretty much 95% of the people on our board wanting him delisted at the end of 2012 to being probably one of our real cult heroes this year. And, God knows what he can do in the future, because he's just got a fantastic future ahead of him, in my opinion.
You're not saying the list manager got it right, are you, Macca?
The list manager?
Yeah.
Terry Wallace?
I was thinking maybe Peter Rode, who does also copy a bit of flack on our board.
Yeah, well, I mean, I never wanted O'Shea axed. I didn't think... I thought he was scapegoated last year pretty poorly. And, nothing made me happier this year than him becoming a really consistent, very good player.
So,
in Rode we trust.
We might move on, guys, and start looking at the grand final. Obviously, Port not involved in it, but it's going to be a pretty good big game. A couple of former Port boys playing there in Sean Burgoyne and Daniel Pearce. Rick, might start with you, mate. What are your thoughts, just briefly, on the grand final and who you think will win this week?
If I was going to be brutally honest, I don't really care. Port's not playing, but to be a purist football supporter, I hope Freo wins. I like this. To continue the Cinderella story from Port Adelaide, and I think they've been a deserved team. They've been fantastic. That game, how they dismantled Sydney last week was just amazing. They just tore them a new one, and West Hawthorn's had their time in the sun. They've been up for the last 6-7 years, and they're a great team, great skills. But I think a bit like Geelong and Sydney, they're starting to get a little bit old, and I think the younger, fresher Freo is going to be too strong and will take them down.
For me, I think I probably want Freo to win. I just can't hack Sean Burgoyne winning a premiership for Hawthorn, I don't think. I'm still pretty dirty on his move, and don't really want that to happen. Whereas I think Pearcey, he probably deserves one, and Pavlich as well. I think you know, after so many years, and the fact that he stayed loyal to Freo for such a long time, it would be a very well-deserved premiership for him to win one near the end of his career.
Spot on, Macca.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll be a draw, and then the second week Fremantle will win.
That's an interesting call.
That'll be Ross Lyon's second draw in a few years too.
God,
Watch
he'd
it
be
happen.
nervous, wouldn't he?
He plays the sort of game style that could result in a draw, I reckon. They tend to be, although they've changed a little bit Freo now, haven't they, from the St Kilda game style. I think there's been a lot said about the sort of negative game style, but I think they have become a bit more attacking. But
they're a very quick side, and you know they play pretty attractive football, even though they are fairly defensive as well. They sort of change from week to week for what they want to do. I mean, one week they play that real dour defensive footy, and then the next week they kick a heap of goals, and you know guys like Ballantyne and Waters just tear people apart. So
yeah. I got to admit, I'm kind of torn on it. Like I do like having Freo as a bit of a punching bag in the league. Like it's nice to be able to sort of just rag on them, and no matter how bad things are going, you go, well, at least we've won a premiership in the AFL.
Yeah.
So they're nice to have around just to kind of laugh at and poke fun at. But I would actually like to see him win the flag. I reckon, as you said before, with Pav there, you know, you'd love to see Pav get a flag. He's been such a great player, such an underrated player, I reckon, for such a large portion of his career. Even though he's always been sort of, you know, recognised as Freo's best player, I think he's never really been talked about in terms of, you know, the best player in the league in the way that I think perhaps he should have been at various stages of his career. And but to be so loyal and to stick with it for a team that's really, let's face it, not had a lot of success over the years, you'd love to see him get up just for Pav, I reckon. And I do have a mate who's a long-suffering Freo fan, so I would like to see him get up for him. But I think that probably Rick's first point of not really caring is probably closer to the mark, to be honest.
I'd also like Freo to win just to see the meltdown that'll happen if Hawthorn lose on BigFooty. I mean,
Bye, buddy.
It'll be great to see, I think.
I think there'll be a bigger meltdown in Freo. I don't think they'll know what to do with themselves. It'll be out of control.
Actually, Macca, a question for you. You're our expert reviewer. Do you reckon Ross Lyon St Kilda compared to Ross Lyon Freo, his Freo team spreads a lot better than the St Kilda team, which has increased their attacking capacity compared to his St Kilda days?
Well, I think that's probably just football as a whole has gone that direction a little bit more. Whereas at St Kilda, I mean, certainly, I think with St Kilda he had more star players, you know, guys like Goddard and Fisher and, you know, Hudson and Lenny Hayes and Dal Santo and all these really big name players. Whereas at Freo there's one or two, but it's more of a big team effort. And I do think, yeah, definitely a lot more attacking than they ever were at St Kilda.
They should have done better, that St Kilda team, really, shouldn't they? When you start listing off those names.
Oh, they had to win a flag.
Yeah. All right, boys. So let's move on from the grand final and get back to some port topics, and let's start having a look at the season as a whole. What did you guys think of the season? Obviously, I think everyone's probably going to be pretty chuffed about it, but if we just talk just very generally to start with, just overall feelings of the season, we'll get into some more specifics as we go along. Macca, obviously pretty happy, mate.
Oh, how could you go wrong? I mean, I guess, you know, new coach, new CEO, new fitness coach, new captain. I mean, there was a lot to sort of look forward to in the off-season, but also a lot of, you know, nerves and, you know, how are we going to go? Is it going to work? You know, all that sort of stuff. And you got to say it has at this point in time. Clearly, we had a big spike up the ladder. You know, we were fitter, stronger, a better game plan, much more confident. We got a lot more out of pretty much all of our players. There was only really one or two that didn't really develop this year. So looking at it as a whole, I mean, yeah, it's just been a fantastic year. And it's great just to be confident about Port Adelaide again. Just going to games, knowing that you're going to put in an effort. No matter what happens, that the reason you're going to lose is just because you've lost to a better team on the day, as opposed to losing because you've had some farcical, you know, breakdown halfway through the last quarter, or, you know, just unfit or anything like that. So, as a whole, yeah, A+ this season, I think. For me.
And Rick, I think this is merging with our next topic, which was going to be what went right. And I think it's probably safe to say we're all going to say it was a good season. So we may as well merge these two together and tell us what you thought of the season, Rick, and what you thought went right this year.
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing, well, there's numerous things that went right for us. I think, getting getting David Koch on was a key pillar of moving forward. And if you think in the off season or at the end of last season when we were all talking about on the board and how many people were anti David Koch to start with and didn't think it was the right move, and how he's really been able to exert his influence and show that he's not just a media guy, but he's a perfect performer for the footy club as well. And and that really just swung everything. That created such a positive momentum for the club throughout the whole off season and into the season. It was amazing. And for me, the best thing, or what went right for us, which created our improvement up the ladder, was the youth of the footy team and how they stepped up. And so your Jackson Trengrove and your Chad Wingard and Ollie Wines and Jake Need and all of those young boys, and I'm probably missing a whole host of them, there were so many, but they're the ones that really stepped up to the plate and said, what, boys, we want to go forward, and they took it on, and it was great to see, and I was very happy, exceeded expectations.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you're going to agree, TSW. Pretty happy, mate. What did you think specifically went right?
Look, I think probably the most important thing is that our depth just looks brilliant now. I mean, there's probably only one player on our list still that hasn't improved immensely in the past 12 months. When you look at guys like Archie and Newton and Cleary and all these guys, they've improved dramatically. They're playing league football consistently. You have guys like Newton and stuff that are just pushing to make that AFL team, and that's so important. To sort of stay towards the top as well. We need these players to really come on. But I think probably the one guy that continually, for some reason, just gets ignored, well, there's probably two, really, and that's Keith Thomas and probably even Peter Road as well, where these two guys, Keith has really managed and sort of been behind everything, really, which has improved for the club. When you look at guys like Kenny and Koch, Keith was behind all of that sort of movement, and it's amazing because the hate he's got from some people at the start and all this sort of stuff, and there was all these worries that he was a mole and all this sort of rubbish. He's
the Norwood imposter.
Yeah, he's just turned everything on completely, and he's made this all happen. So I really think he's one that in years to come we'll look back on him and realise what he's done to our club. And Road, again, probably someone that's been paid out by a lot of people in the past 2 years. But this thing seemed to be going right with our list management and everything. We don't really have these players anymore that shouldn't be there. We probably were able to get rid of them all in one last sweep this year. And we've brought on some awesome players, guys like Monthrees. And even Renuth, though he hasn't done a hell of a lot this year, it's good to have that backup, I guess, support there for the young guys.
Yeah, and obviously a lot went right this year. Obviously, I was just wrapped with the year. I think there's probably... realistically, probably the best we could have hoped for in terms of this year. The most pleasing thing, I think, is the change in the mentality of the whole club, actually. I was going to say the team, but it was actually the whole club that we just got things right off-field and on-field, where you can just tell that we're building for something for the future. We're actually heading in the right direction. We're creating a culture off-field and on-field that's going to see us in really good stead, and I think that's much more important than the actual results we got this year. Even though the results we got this year were fantastic, the culture that's being created at the club by that off-field team of Koshy and Keith and all those guys, even Darren Burgess, getting that fitness stuff right, and then obviously the on-field team and the coaches with Kenny Hinkley obviously driving that real culture of honesty and hard work, and you get what you get what you pay for and all that sort of stuff. It really does look like we're setting ourselves up for a great future. Obviously, the young player development was a massive one this year. Seeing some of these young guys come through, and you talk about the Wingards, the Needs, the O'Sheas, those players stepping up to the next level. The other thing I thought that was probably underrated this year was, I've sort of labelled it as senior player retraining, but some of the guys like Kane Corns and even Dom Cassisi, even Matt Thomas, Tommy Logan, some of these senior players, when they have come into the team and been given an opportunity, we've seen different stuff from them, I think, where they've been able to really play a role within a much more unified team structure where, they weren't expected to do everything, but they were just expected to play their role and fit into the team and do the bit that was required. And I think particularly Kane was a real sign of that, where he was able to change his game again, which, once again, massive credit to Kane Corns to be able to keep adapting his game as the game keeps changing, and to be a much more positive, creative player that he was this year. It was an absolute credit to him. And so I thought that buy-in from the young players and the senior players was a massive part of our improvement and our changes. Macca, did you have anything else you wanted to add there in terms of what went right?
Yeah, well, that's one of the notes that I had was better on-field leadership, which is where we improved a lot this year. Not necessarily, the leadership group in terms of like Boak and Ebert, those guys, but as you said, guys like Kasisi, Logan, even Carlisle, Trengove, I mean, they all stood up. They all led from the front. Did what they had to do in so many games this year, and that was a large part of our improvement on field this year. But the main improvement I thought was with Darren Burgess and getting us fit. I mean, just
absolutely
the years of under Primus where we just ran out of steam sort of halfway through the third quarter, and we knew it was going to happen week after week. To have that confidence to know that going into three-quarter time we were going to storm home. And we did so many times this year. We came from behind in so many games, and we looked shot at three-quarter time in a couple of games. Games like the second showdown, and we just knew that we were going to come home, and we did. And that's probably the best appointment for the year for me. Was getting Burgess back and getting us super AFL, elite fit.
Absolutely. And how exciting is it to think what that's going to be next year? With a second pre-season under that same training regime, that same group, the younger players gone through their second pre-season. I can't imagine how fit they're going to be next year after what he achieved in just one pre-season.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we
remember what Darren said in the interview?
Yeah, that they were going to push them another 25-30% or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, considering how we went this year, and I mean, if we want to play this really fast-paced handball, run and gun footy, which we've tried to play this year and for the most part succeeded, but if we really want to do that to the standard of a Geelong, then we do need to improve that, another 20-25% in terms of fitness.
So let's move on. Let's start talking about what went wrong. Obviously, we're all pretty happy with the year. There's probably not a massive list, but maybe TSW, you might start, mate, and talk about what you thought went wrong this year.
It sounds harsh, but probably Butcher hasn't developed like we all sort of would love him to. Really needs to step up. I guess some people are losing faith, but I still have a lot of faith in the guy. I think what he really needs is confidence. I mean, he's a great guy. I know him somewhat personally, and I think it's just all about confidence of Butch. He just loses it. He hasn't hit packs anywhere near as hard as what he was, and really, when you look at the year we've had, there isn't much more to hate, really. But yeah, I just love to see him step up, and hopefully he can get a full pre-season and really get that confidence up and just smash it next year.
And Rick, what were your thoughts in terms of what went wrong, mate?
Oh, look, for me, this is being hypercritical, I guess. I harped on it numerous occasions. We didn't get enough ball for an extended period of time when the other team got a run on. And we're not the only team that's gone through that either, and we're a young team, so I understand that. But, we can't, and the Geelong game last week was another example. We can't go quarters where we're not really touching the ball or halting a run on, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And I guess an extension of that is we need to look at becoming a little bit more efficient with our delivery out of the defensive 50. There was quite a few times where we just got a real bit sloppy, very panicked, and we need a bit more structure and discipline with how we're going to move the ball out of defence. But like I said, I'm being very hypercritical, and I mean, that's going to come as the playing group and the defensive six play more together and develop together. So good things are coming to us, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. And Macca, what did you think, mate?
I think both of those are pretty spot on. I mean, with Butcher, he's probably the big disappointment of the year. Maybe the last couple of years, really. Just we needed another key forward to stand up and give us a second option, with Westhoff playing a more sort of all-round role. Stewart had one crack and clearly wasn't good enough. Salter didn't get a game. Shaw's too young. It was really up to Butcher to stand up, and obviously he had a couple of good games. I mean, there were a few games there where he just wasn't into it at all. Just looked so timid. He's almost a completely different player to the player of his first couple of seasons. Just in terms of you don't really see him lead anymore. He's not really a leading forward. He relies on sort of pushing another player under the ball to take a mark, but often drops the mark. His kicking is just horrid. So he's really the one that really needs to step up and improve next year. Fingers crossed he can have a proper full pre-season. Hopefully get some weight on and a bit more strength in his core and in his hips.
I think he's been promised, to be honest. If you look at how he was playing in that last year with under Matty,
yeah,
he just wasn't going up. He was sort of staying down and sort of playing like what you'd expect Hitchcock to be playing, and just sort of going for the ball when it fell to the ground.
Yeah, he's sort of playing like a taller Robbie Gray sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people focus on his kick of the ball, but if you actually look at his kick, it's not the kick which is the issue, and it's the ball drop. But for whatever reason, I don't know why, we just haven't changed it. And it's not going to take much to change that drop, but just whatever the club are doing, I think that really needs to be the focus of Butcher, just to get that ball drop perfect. And then from there, I don't think we'll have issues. His confidence will go up with his kicking. He won't worry about that so much. And I think another pre-season with Kenny and his structure and instruction from those guys, I think we will see that improvement. I hope we'll see that improvement. But yeah, I definitely would not be writing him off in the slightest.
Yeah, and I agree with all you guys. I had Butcher on my list of what went wrong this year as well, but and as with all the things on my list, I've sort of said, well, these are things that went wrong, but really they were kind of, in some ways to be expected. I mean, Butcher, we know he didn't have a great pre-season. He has had those injuries with his hips. I think, you talk about him not really behaving like a key forward, like looking for the ball on the ground or playing more like a small forward. And I think we've seen that with a lot of the key forwards in the game. People used to talk about Buddy Franklin in that same way. People used to talk about Taylor Walker in the same way. When they're young and underdeveloped, they often are using those other skills to sort of work their way into the game and to get a kick and to kick a goal. I think I still have a lot of faith in Butch. I really think as he develops, if he can just get a good pre-season and get some good fitness, some good, particularly core strength, I think, into him, I think we're going to see a completely different player with a lot more consistency. I think the injuries have really hurt him and held him back. The other things I thought I had on my list in terms of what went wrong this year, really, the two I had was really the mid-season slump. That sort of round 6 to round 10, I think it was. That was disappointing. Probably not unexpected though for a young team. I think to expect them to be up for the entire season was probably going to be unrealistic. And in a similar vein, I thought the lack of consistency across the games was disappointing at times this year. We just didn't seem to be able to really run out a full four-quarter game, really at any stage throughout the year. But I think, there are things that went wrong, but there are things that were expected as well. With a young team, with a developing team, you expect that. And I think that's definitely stuff that we can look at improving on next year. Probably the other big disappointment for me this year was seeing Redden go down with injury. I was really looking forward to seeing what he could come up with this year. Particularly in tandem with Lobby, who obviously came on a lot this year. I think, it's going to be really exciting to see where those two can go. But that was probably the other big disappointment with me, was just not being able to see him, go out a full season like Lobby did and see, how they would have ended up perhaps playing together as a tandem, or, who would have taken that lead ruck role. I think, that's probably the other thing I would have liked to have seen. And I guess that kind of leads us towards next season and where we can improve. So, Macca, you might like to start that discussion off, mate.
Yeah, probably midfield structures, and I think this is where Philip Walsh becomes really important. I think, as Rick mentioned, fade-outs were a bit of an issue numerous times this year. It was the uncompetitive first quarters for about 5 games in the first half of the season, and then it became the uncompetitive third quarters in the second half of the season. And I think that largely came about due to us getting absolutely hammered in the midfield when the opposition had momentum. And we can talk about sort of getting our defensive structures right and all that sort of thing, but when your midfield's just losing every single stoppage, every single clearance for a 10 or 15 minute period, you're just putting your defence under so much pressure. So getting Philip Walsh to come in, getting Hinkley to work with them, probably fitness as well, improving that fitness again, another 15 to 20%, just to work out ways on how to sort of strategise in how to stop the opposition sort of not just completely destroying us when they've got momentum, because it did cost us games and it did cost us the final against Geelong in the end, that third quarter. That's probably the main part of where I would like to see improvement. The other one was probably forward structures. We've already spoken about Butcher. Whether we need to trade in another sort of key forward with a bit of experience, or try and draft a young guy like, or a mature age recruit like Mitch Thorpe, someone like that can sort of come in straight away and provide an option. So it's not just sort of Schultz and to a lesser extent Westhoff that have to carry the load up forward. And general improvement from the depth players again. Guys like Heath, Stevenson, Homsch, Need, Newton. Really want to see these guys push for regular AFL football next year.
Yeah. And so, Rick, what did you think, mate? Improvement
well
next
said.
year?
Well said, Macca. I agree with everything there. I want to see our defensive six, especially, to stabilise and be rewarded for the whole season if we can, barring injury, and just let them gel another season, and I reckon that's going to be fantastic. And youth, and all these young boys, 1, 2, going into their third year in the system, that's going to drive our improvement again with the fitness base that they're going to get in their added bulk, and that's going to be a big impetus for us to keep pushing up the ladder. We're going to get another first round draft pick, which is going to slot straight into the team, and when we trade in Jared Pollock and he comes straight into the side as well, that former number 5 draft pick, that's going to be fantastic and just give us a bit more depth at our midfield to try and stretch the opposition a little bit further.
Yeah, and so TSW, perhaps you can tell us where you think we might improve, and let us know if you've got any goss on Pollock as well while you're at it, mate.
Apart from what I think's been posted on the Port board, that's pretty much where I sit. I still think he'll probably end up at Port. I haven't heard who he's confirmed, if he has anyone yet in relation to what team he wants to go to. The first I heard from a few different sources actually was that he was wanting to come to Port. I think the Crows will probably be able to offer a bit more cash, maybe, or at least they'll be willing to offer a bit more cash. But I just can't see what they'll be trading to get him. Vince won't go up there. I just don't think they have enough to get him. I think they probably need him more than what we do, to be honest. Though I think he's going to be a handy addition to Port. I don't know if he's going to be a straight-in walk. I think there's probably a few other players probably keeping him out in Hartlett and these sort of guys. I continued. Our depth needs to continue to, I guess, improve. You look at guys like Archie and Newton, especially this year. If we can see that sort of improvement again from those guys, there's absolutely no way they shouldn't be playing AFL. And it's going to be really interesting to see who they push out, if any. It'll probably be, unfortunately, waiting for injuries if they do occur. But I think it'll be an interesting year to see how we go. We need to improve again, the same sort of amount we did this year, really, for us to continue to rise or at least stay where we are. We were really lucky this year with injuries, didn't really have too many. So I can probably see us finishing a similar sort of spot, I think, maybe next year, but probably deserve it a little bit more, or at least have earned it a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah, and I think you guys have covered probably most of the points I wanted to make in terms of improvement next year. I think we have got a lot of scope for improvement. I think, the extra year's development into those young players, I think is going to see that consistency that I spoke about, both across the season and within games, to start playing more 4-quarter games, which I think will see us continue to improve. I do think that the extra key forward is what we need, and I'm not sure that we need to recruit someone. I really think, I actually feel quite confident that one of Butcher or Shaw is actually going to be, step up enough next year to play that second or third tall forward role, particularly with someone like Jared Redden coming back in as a second ruckman. I think, he's shown a bit of talent up forward as well, and I think, between that trio, I think we're going to have enough tall timber up forward if we just give them a chance to develop, start giving them a few games. I think between the three of them, we're going to see something up there that'll help us in that regard. And I think, the other thing is, once again, just more smart recruiting and smart drafting. I think, looking at some of those players like we brought in this year with, Heath and Stevenson and those kind of guys, Homsch, we added that extra depth to our team. And I think we really, as you said before, just need to keep improving that depth, whether that's through the draft, getting guys like Ollie Wines who can come straight in and be, gun players, or, even Jakey Need who came in and played straight away. Or whether it's getting those slightly more mature age players who are just lacking opportunity elsewhere. I think by a combination of those two, as we said, we've cleaned out a bit more sort of dead wood from the list. I think we can really get a very, very deep list. and see some really intense competition for spots going into next year. And I think that's probably the number one thing that's going to really push us that little bit more, is just that real competition for spots where blokes know that there's spots on the line every single week and they need to really put in if they want to play for the Port Adelaide Football Club. And I think that's a really exciting thing looking into next year. So what we might do, guys, we're almost to the end here. We're going to have a quick chat about our favourite and least favourite moments from the year. And then what I might get just to finish off, I think, is just a prediction for where you think we might finish next year. But to start with, Macca, perhaps you can start just quickly, mate, your favourite and least favourite moment for the year.
Sure, favourite moment. I mean, there's a lot of really obvious choices that I could make here, but I'm going to go a little bit left of centre and say round one, the third quarter. That's when I knew we were going to have a really good year this year. Sort of the first 10 minutes of that quarter, we were peppering the goals. Melbourne couldn't get the ball out of their defensive 50. And in previous years, you'd think, well, all Melbourne have to do is run it down the other end of the ground, kick a goal, and that's going to start, an influx of Melbourne goals, and they'll probably go on to win the game. It didn't happen. We kicked a goal, and then we kicked another 4 or 5, and really hammered them. They beat us in the pre-season. There was a lot of I was quite nervous about that game in round one. I really didn't know how it was going to go. So for us to really hammer them in that first game, I think really set up our season really well. So that for me is my favourite moment for the year. Least favourite, it's a bit of a personal one in that after the Geelong game, sitting at a set of traffic lights on Tapley's Hill Road, someone slammed into the back of me going about 50 kilometres an hour. I didn't notice that everyone else had stopped. I think he was on his phone. Nearly rode off my brand new car, and that was a real pain in the arse. Got a concussion. Don't recommend that for anyone, to be honest.
Fair enough too, mate. All right, TSW, favourite, least favourite moment?
I think favourite's pretty easy. It's the Collingwood final. Was over there for it. Was ridiculously drunk, and that combination's pretty damn good. I mean, sitting there for that last quarter, I was just looking over at a few mates, just shaking my head, just in disbelief that it was actually happening. That we'd come that far. It was incredible. And probably least favourite of the year was another personal one, Ben Newton not getting a game. I just love Ben Newton.
He was a bit hard done by.
He probably deserved the game, but I can understand why he didn't towards the end. But I think next year will be the year of the Newt.
And Rick, what about you, mate? Favourite, least favourite?
Well, look, I guess mine's more of an emotion, but I guess the first 5 rounds, what they did for me as a supporter after the last 5-6 years is give me some hope that we're going in the right direction and we're back on board, and and the supporters started coming, which culminated with the 45,000 with Carlton. So that's probably my favourite. My least favourite moment would have to be the two of them, the Tom Jonas suspension and the Hamish Hartlett suspension. And I think the AFL overall has just become a farce with the bump rule, but they were just very frustrating. So, I mean, again, it's more of a swipe at the game than, those two individual players or the reports. But, just overall, it's just, farcical. And just quickly, you just got to indulge me for 30 seconds, but this is for Casey, who requested it a couple of weeks ago, but I've been missing in action for a little bit. He wanted to know about the fishing. There's plenty of squid everywhere in both sides of the Gulf. I caught a truckload over on at just below Ardrossan on the weekend. There's snapper just off the Glenelg jetty. So anyone with a little boat should be able to get some snapper, and supposedly Port Hughes is banging on lots of whiting. There you go, Casey.
How are the sheep going as well, Rick?
I had 8 processed last week and felt sorry for them, but they tasted bloody good. And but I'm having issues with our fences, and kangaroos are just annihilating them. And so every morning and night, my poor 18-year-old son has to go out and chase the sheep off of other people's property. So,
all right, we're moving back on topic, guys, because we get a bit sidetracked there. Look, my favourite for the year was probably the final against Collingwood, just pipping the comeback showdown, which was just fantastic. So pretty hard to split those, but I think the final against Collingwood, doing it on the big stage at the G against a quality team, was pretty darn good and impossible to go past. My least favourite for the year was definitely the round 10 loss to the Western Bulldogs. I can't believe no one else mentioned it. I thought that would be a bit of a favourite. I thought having lost sort of 4 games in a row that were probably games we didn't necessarily expect to win, we came up with one that we certainly did expect to win and lost pretty disappointingly, I thought, in that game. And that was a real low light of the season where, we were starting to wonder, oh no, was it just a bit of a honeymoon? Are we really going somewhere? And fortunately, from that point, we managed to turn it round. But I thought that round 10 loss to the Western Bulldogs was pretty disappointing. So before we wrap up, guys, we're going to quickly run around and we're going to have a quick chat about, a quick prediction of where you think we're going to finish next year. So TSW, do you want to start, mate?
Yeah, probably around the same sort of spot, probably 6 to 8. I think we'll improve immensely, but I think there's a lot of other teams that will probably improve. A few will probably drop out again. But yeah, I think if we are consistent, if we keep doing what we're doing, 6 to 8, maybe even a little bit higher than that, probably not out of our realms. But yeah, I don't want to reach too hard as of yet, don't want to become crashing down.
Rick, what about you, mate?
Yeah, I reckon we could maybe make 4th at a stretch, but otherwise I'm with our friend there in around the 5 to 8th, but I'll go 4th. I think Geelong, Sydney and Hawks might all be due with their ageing list for a little bit of a slip, fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm. Been saying that for a few years, Rick, but I hope you're right.
I know I have. It's got to happen.
I think we all have, mate. I wasn't just picking on you. Macca, what are your thoughts, mate?
My expectation is top 6, so we get a home final.
Nice. Yeah, and I think the same. I'd predict us to finish 6th, I reckon. I think we'll have an improved year, but obviously it's going to be tougher. We'll have a tougher draw. Teams will be coming at us. Teams will be analysing us a lot more. And so I think whilst we'll improve as a team, I think we probably expect to finish around the same spot, and we should be happy with that. And then really pushing for top 4 and potentially, getting deep into the finals the year after, I think, is where we should be looking.
Yep.
So thanks, guys. Another great podcast. Until next week, go the Power.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers, guys.
See you later.